What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and Aaron Glenn has finally delivered some coaching staff hirings for us to scrutinize, and we have 2 new coordinators and our first positional coach hiring with the exodus of Robert Saleh's former staff. Aaron Whitecotton leaving, Marquand Manuel, Tony Oden, Keith Carter being gone, right? There's going to Ron Middleton, another one we just moved on from. But I want to kick things off with who is our new offensive line coach in Steve Heiden or Heiden, because this is going to be the biggest question mark of any of the guys that we talk about, at least up to this date. He was the former tight end coach for the Lions, where he's been in that position for the last 2 years after having a few other roles previously. But it's a former tight end player in the NFL, bringing almost 150 games of experience to the New York Jets. Obviously, his work at tight end speaks for itself. You look at his time as a tight end coach with the Cardinals, for example. Zach Ertz was going on his run where he could have been considered one of the top tier guys up there with the Kittles and the Kelseys at the time. Also, he was still having rookies break NFL records for most touchdowns in a game, for example. And of course, it goes without saying, his work with Sam Laporta, the ridiculous records he had him break in his rookie season, and what he's been able to continue to do in the face of injury, and all of the elite talent that also surrounds him. Phenomenal job. Now, the question mark here is, while he's had previous experience, not only has he been a assistant special teams coach before, he was also an assistant offensive line coach, and for what it's worth, he was one of the longest tenured assistant coaches in Cardinals history. Whether you consider that to be a good thing or bad, bad meaning he was never looked at as great in his roles and didn't necessarily move up, or awesome, did I say great? Bad in that he never moved up, or great in that he's been able to really sit there and look at all of the fundamentals, how he wants to be a excellent coach at that position, and then finally at least got a crack at tight end before moving on to the Lions here. But question mark, because with that said, he's never had extensive experience being the guy at that position, right? If I had to force myself to make connections here, you would look at tight end historically as an extension of the offensive line, right? It's basically a third offensive tackle, a sixth lineman, however you want to look at it. And then you look at it as what other qualities make this guy potentially a exceptional receiver, right? I think that's generally been the view, and then now you have more innovative thinking in terms of, can this guy be a move tight end? Can he be more of a slot receiver kind of guy? Can he be an H-back? So you're learning the fundamentals, right? He would have been working hand in hand with Frank Haley over there, for example. You'd also imagine he's working with the passing game coordinator in Inkstrin, who just so happens should also be joining the New York Jets as an OC. So I have no doubt that he has the fundamentals down, and he'll probably pick up on the techniques and archetypes and all that kind of stuff that somebody like Inkstrin, if he does get the OC spot, will want to use. But it's still a question mark. You could have went out there, if you were Aaron Glenn, and found yourself a 1-to-1 match, right? Another offensive line coach that you felt really good in, that brings a little bit more of that experience you're looking for, and tangible proof that he's either good or bad at his job. So this one's going out there on a limb. I won't say it's necessarily a bad hire whatsoever, but this is definitely one where you look at it and you can say that this isn't a home run selection. So we'll see if the innovation in terms of what he was thinking here, building out the staff, works in his favor. But it is a huge critical position for us, right? This is one where we criticize the hell out of Keith Carter for the job that he's done. And if you take the players' input out of it, that still leaves you with him last year improving Joe Tippmann, seeing the rise of Olufashanu. Obviously, our left guard came in, did a phenomenal job right out of the gate. AVT looks like he was regathering himself. So there was some good. I think his reputation's done him more harm than not. But nonetheless, we'll see how this plays out. Defensive coordinator is the next spot I want to talk about because Steve Wilks has been tied to him for the longest. And there's, as critical as I've been for him in one of the last few videos that I've done, it was more so from the standpoint, again, I didn't want us hiring a guy with experience just for the sake of saying, hey, look, we got experience in here. There's a lot to be impressed about in Steve Wilks' resume. There's also a lot that you can criticize, nitpick, pull apart, and say this guy is terrible. And you can do that with many other DCs. We've done it with Robert Saleh, even though he's crafted top 10 teams for us. Jeff Ulbrich. You can go down a list of names of plenty of guys throughout the NFL. So if we're focusing in on where I think he'll help us out at, structure of the defense. Historically, his coaching experience is top tier, right? Almost 2 decades in the NFL, going back to 2005. And then, of course, plenty of years in the college ranks as well. He's worked his way up through effectively any position you can, leading up to head coach if you're on the defensive side of the ball. Assistant defensive backs coach, defensive backs coach, secondaries coach, defensive passing game coordinator, interim head coach, assistant head coach, and then of course head coach itself along with defensive coordinator. So he's gotten to view this thing in multiple years from all aspects. The back seven of the defense, of course working at each level as a defensive coordinator, but the back seven specifically, then you get to start looking at things like from a 30,000 foot view. How do I galvanize the talent here? Where do I see us needing less resources and more physical traits? There's a lot of nuances that you can get into it. Tons of schemes that he's seen, been a part of, and run over the years. And then, of course, his personnel groupings, right? He's been at the forefront of a lot of innovation in the NFL, which will kind of tie into the last piece that I think will be a large beneficiary of, which is situational football. Even though we've been a top-tier defensive unit under Robert Saleh, at least for half the years he's been with us, it always felt like that's been an Achilles heel for us, right? Third down football, fourth and, whatever situations. Really just whenever we needed a key takeaway, which I know you can't force, but whenever we needed a key takeaway, whenever there were matchups we should have overwhelmingly won, in my opinion, and just had complete shutdown games. And then, of course, just the level of consistency, right? It never really felt like we were able to take advantage of opponents that had weaknesses, or we were always at the mercy of any tight end that walked into the building because we just never had a solid game plan, or technique was lacking, or you're not going to hear those same conversations about we didn't have the energy, or people pointing fingers about I did my job but other people didn't, etc., etc. Between Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilks, I think we'll kill a lot of that. Now, in terms of the innovation, in terms of other situational football things, keep in mind how long he's been in here, right? He's seen the birth of things like dual threat quarterbacks. He's seen air raid offenses, spread offenses coming out of college. He's seen RPOs, right? He's seen your Tim Tebow types. He's also seen your mercenaries in terms of your Tom Brady's and such. So, and then he's had your rush specimens like Cam Newton in his purview, right? People he's had to game plan against. So I love all of it. I think even when you look at recency bias, because a lot of people go into the statistics and stuff, his defense with the 49ers, which took them to the Super Bowl, it was third in points scored, right? Still very top tier unit in many aspects, considering D'Amico Ryans was just coming off of the year prior, the number one in total defense, right? So there were some step backs. I think that in other areas there were definitely a lot of upgrades as well. I think when you want to put some numbers to what he's done, when he's called plays, he's had at least 2 in the 5 years a top 10 defense, which being able to duplicate an effort like that is much harder than it seems just hearing those numbers, right? Defenses from year to year, they fluctuate wildly, right? It's the same thing that even us as fans were concerned over, right? Can the level of play be sustained? Can we keep it up? It's okay if we're dropping a couple, slots here and there, but you don't want to see you go from the number one unit to average, right? Middle tier. You can see if the level of play is maintaining or not. So I love that. For situations where he's been a defensive coordinator or interim head coach or assistant head coach, DC, anything where it comes to him calling and managing the flow of a game, he's somewhere in the realm of 60 wins and 54 losses with a 4-3 record in the playoffs. So I'll take that, right? Not only has he at least gotten to the playoffs, he's won more often than not, which is still a critical factor, right? It's what's keeping, and I'm not putting him on the same plane, but it's what's keeping someone like Mike Tomlin employed, even though he can't seem to figure out how to get past the first round. There's 2 things here as well to Steve Wilks that I think will excite, 1, us as fans, 2, Aaron Glenn. 1 is the mentality standpoint, right? There was a quote from when the Panthers moved on from him and they decided to go with Frank Reich instead of Wilks, where he mentioned, I'm disappointed but not defeated. Many people aren't built for this, but I know what it means to persevere and see it through. It's gritty. It feels like something you could hear Aaron Glenn saying to a certain degree after a loss that he's just disgusted by. And so I think he has that allure of that grit, that toughness, that grinded out kind of mentality that you need to have as a New York Jet, right? And then we have a glimpse into what we may expect from him in terms of being on the sidelines or in the booth as well. When he was with the 49ers, he mentioned he plans to be up in the booth during game days, and he said it allows him to separate himself from some of the emotion on the field and allows for a better vantage point to call plays. So I would say that, I don't imagine things change for him. I don't know if he's done that consistently at prior stops, right? And again, keep in mind how many teams he's been with. 49ers, Cardinals, Panthers, Browns, Bears, Chargers, Commanders, which would have been the Redskins at the time. But he's done a lot. He's been there, done that, seen it all. So he's not a guy that should have a ton of shock value in terms of something catching him by surprise. So with the talent level that we have, I at least feel really good about the setup. And by no means, let's not forget, even though Aaron Glenn is relying on him in many aspects, Aaron Glenn is still going to be the archetype, setting the tone and being very heavily involved in terms of what he wants to see out of this defense. He just doesn't want to need to call the plays for it. So ultimately, if you could put a little bit of a rein on what has made Steve Wilks unsuccessful, I think you're talking about a top tier hire here. And then finally, our new special teams coordinator, Chris Banjo. He's coming in as well as a former special teams player, right? I think he's had about 130 plus games of experience he's bringing. And he just stopped playing football in 2022, right? So you're talking about a 2-year removal from his playing days. That mentality is still going to be there, right? And you've heard all of the, what am I trying to say here? Like memos about what it takes to be a special teams guy, which is generally a lunatic, right? So Chris Banjo seems like he has that to his mentality, but also he seems like a pretty straightforward shooter, well, mannered, well organized, gathers himself really well, obviously smart. When you think about who he's been around and some of his connections, right? For one, you have the fact that he played for Glenn as his coach when he was with the New Orleans Saints under Peyton. And then you also have him working under Mike Westhoff as a special teams assistant, right? So when you look at the connections, you look at who he's been groomed by, you look at his playing days being a former safety, but a special teams ace more often than not. You look at the production of the special teams unit from the Broncos over the last 2 years. He's been highly coveted, right? Going back to last year. So landing him is a huge positive for Aaron Glenn. And Also, when you want to compare him to like Brant Boyer, this is a guy that could stick with us for like a decade. Brant Boyer was with us for about 8 years, somewhere in that range, right? So he could also end up, if he works out really well, being the rare coach that can make his way from special teams to head coach. Will be the benefit of draft picks and all that kind of stuff. But I think he'll do well. Westhoff plans on coming back during training camp. You imagine it'll help take some of the edge off of Banjo getting his first role, leading a unit of his own. He'll be able to seek out the advice, the mentorship of one of the most elite special teams coordinators in the history of football. And statistically, Broncos, they were first in punt return average, second in punt return against, eighth in kickoff return, and then ninth in kickoff return average against. So a top 10 unit in both phases of special teams, being able to cover kicks as well as being able to receive them and turn some top tier performances out. Right, Marvin Mims working his way into all pro discussions, Pro Bowl looks, all that good stuff. So when you're talking about us having guys like Irv Charles and Xavier Gipson, and even seeing if we can do something with the likes of Corley and some of the other guys that have stood out as well, you feel really, really good about this hire. So let me know what you guys ultimately think about all of these guys, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.